Moin Rabbani has analysis on this. As I previously stated, Israel's aspirations to become regional hegemon is pure delusional hubris. Israel's too small and vulnerable, lacks the required demographic and resource base, and is fully dependent on external support. Already in Iran, we are learning that Israel is bitten off more than the U.S. can chew on its behalf. A state that can't decisively defeat a second-order militia like Hamas or administer a fatal blow to Hezbollah and needs the full might of the U.S. to wage war against Iran, a state under comprehensive sanctions since the 1970s, is now threatening to take on NATO member Turkey, and after hubris comes nemesis. Okay? The IDF chief of staff has warned that the IDF is on the verge of collapse after 900 straight days of war. This is what he told the government yesterday. Reservists are being stretched to a breaking point across multiple active fronts simultaneously: Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, West Bank, and the Iranian front. No ultra-Orthodox conscription law has been passed, leaving thousands exempt from service and practice. The cabinet approved legislation of dozens more outposts and farms in the West Bank, requiring additional troops to protect them. Jewish nationalist terrorism is surging in the West Bank, requiring an additional battalion to be deployed there, with possibly another needed soon. Because, like, they have this endless ambition of advancing the Greater Israel Project, right? And in order to do this Greater Israel Project, you need more troops, because it's like this unlimited violence that you're subjecting the indigenous population of Palestinians to, and therefore there's going to be some retaliation. And in that, when that retaliation comes, you have to like defend the settler terrorists, right? Mandatory service is set to shorten to 30 months in January 2027, the opposite of the IDF's request to extend it to 36 months. The government is avoiding passing the necessary laws, conscription, reserves, extended service, largely due to political pressures related to the Haredi exemption controversy. The expansionist policies of the government are straining the army to the point of no return. The IDF cannot carry this load and will collapse into itself, according to the chief of staff, soon if the wars of expansion do not stop. Israel is simply not big enough and not rich enough to dominate the Middle East in the long term. And it's the craziest part about it is Israel and America are not even big enough and rich enough to continue this, right? That's what's so wild about it, because the first time there is actually a sovereign state with defensive and offensive capabilities willing to fucking go to bat, willing to actually do the unthinkable, which is fight back in a way that only sovereign states can, all of a sudden, the dynamic shifts so dramatically, okay? This is huge. This is huge as far as like diminishing American capabilities, diminishing America's force projection capabilities, diminishing America's like actual surveillance capabilities in the region, radar systems, and destroying American military equipment in the process is bloodying the American nose a little bit. And I've already explained to you guys, especially many of you in this community that are obviously anti-war, that this kind of militant deterrence is not necessarily a bad thing, because in the absence of a sovereign state that is willing to take on American hubris, we have dominated the entire planet in very violent ways, and in ways that actually do not benefit the American citizens either. None of our imperial endeavors actually are beneficial to the average working class American. But because we've been able to, continue this war machine without much domestic impact, right? Because at the end of the day, Americans can just like not know whatever the fuck we're up to, on the other side of the planet, and be totally sheltered from the impact, with the exception of like what's going on right now with the oil prices, the price that Americans experience at the pump, right? With those exceptions, like Americans can just like live their normal daily lives, and the American government is so powerful that they can shelter the American population from the impact. But all of our resources in this somewhat invisible way is being allocated to constant military adventurism overseas. And those are resources that are much needed here. So my argument has always been, we should put an end to this endless warfare all around the world and eventually spend our, collective output, our resources on ourselves. This will give breathing room to the rest of the planet. This will give breathing room and offer sovereignty and dignity to the nations in the periphery that have often been dominated by Western imperialism. And this will be beneficial for us Americans as well. So that's the reason why I don't have this like American imperialism is falling apart, and therefore this is a bad thing attitude that I think American chauvinists have, and their attitude has started shifting a little bit. I think like people are seeing exactly what's going on, right? For the past 3 weeks, I think people were just like holding on to this idea that like America's going to pull through. Obviously, our dicks are so hard. We have the mightiest military. We have the most sophisticated equipment. It's the most expensive military. Not realizing that we were not achieving our war goals, right? This is beyond the fact that obviously we were, goaded into doing this thing because of Israel directly, and I say that all the time because it's true. And my first principle is say the truth, right? Always say the truth. You do not have to compromise on that. And that's the thing. Like, even those who are a part of the American foreign policy machine, the blob, if you want to call it that have always demanded that we finally do this thing, right? Go to war with Iran, recognized fairly quickly that this is not working out in our favor. Perhaps it was a lack of understanding Iranian capabilities, undermining Iranian capabilities. Perhaps it was because Iran had always demonstrated strategic restraint, and we assumed that was because they just did not have the tools to be able to, punish the global economy, punish American capital, punish America directly by destroying its tools in the region, right? But for one reason or another, we launched into this idiotic quagmire, pushed into it by Israel, absolutely, right? And now we're suffering the consequences of it. And you have troops. You have American troops gearing up for boots on the ground military warfare, which will be a spectacular failure. On the one hand, Donald Trump is communicating that he's ready for an exit ramp, right? And there is some there's some good news there, because I've been telling you from the start, the best out of all of the worst case scenarios, the best case scenario here is that America's nose is a little bit bloodied and they're forced into de-escalation and they're forced into leaving Iran alone. That would be the best possible scenario out of all of the likely outcomes here. The worst case scenario would be America continues to escalate and continues to wage war and tries to invade Iran with troops, with boots on the ground, and that would be tremendously bad. That would be one of the worst outcomes. Obviously, the worst outcome would still be nukes. There's still room in the escalation ladder when you have nukes. On the one hand, I'm trying to figure out if it's a bluff, but on the other hand, I have seen the way America operates, and I assume that America doesn't actually, move troops into the region just as a bluff, right? Everything you say is logical, but what do you think is going on in the minds of the Trump admin? Because continue just seems to be digging their own hole with losses and more. It's a difficult situation that Trump has found himself in, partially because he didn't listen to his own generals. He didn't listen to his own analysts that warned him that this exact same scenario would play itself out. And he listened to Israel instead. He listened to Witkoff. He listened to Kushner. He listened to Israel. He listened to Lindsey Graham, who was communicating the messages that he was getting from Israel to specifically convince Donald Trump. So basically, for all of those reasons, he found himself in this massive quagmire, this massive fuck up where the rest of the markets are being punished. Obviously, everyone is leaning heavily into their strategic reserves at this point. I just don't know. I don't know. I can't give you a real answer as far as what Trump could do here, because he has done the unthinkable, right? He's done the unthinkable as far as invading, as far as bombing Iran, as far as killing the Ayatollah. These are unprecedented times that we are experiencing. We have never fought against an enemy like Iran, right? have not had that situation happen at all. Even with Vietnam, for example, sure, there was the USSR, there's China, but like with Vietnam, they were getting funding and support from the USSR, and that was very helpful for them. But like ultimately, this was a country that was dominated by colonial occupation when America invaded, right? Whereas Iran has had a successful revolution, right? Iran had a successful revolution, and America never stopped trying to destabilize it. And for that reason, Iran has basically designed its entire society for this exact moment to defend themselves and to defend their sovereignty at this exact moment, right? And that's where we're at. And the results are unlike anything America's ever experienced. It's far worse than any of the military, any of the long-standing military failures that we've had. Where we lose battles, but then we end up winning the war in some way, but we don't actually end up winning the war at all. We retreat, but in the process, we're making money. Like our capital owners are making money, right? That's normally how it goes. Wars are not meant to be won. They're meant to be continued. But the reality is this time, there is actually a serious penalty to the global economy. And therefore, you're molesting the money a little bit. It's not, this is no longer a contained incident where you can just have your defense contractors inflate their budgets and send your developers down to an area that we have dominated and destabilized successfully and occupied militarily. This is no longer a contained case. Iran is very specifically and very deliberately striking back at the heart of capital, sometimes even American capital, right? And that is causing a massive problem. It's causing a massive problem. So Trump has two options here. He does the reasonable thing, as I said, does the smart thing, which is de-escalate and pull out and take one of the fattest L's of all time. This will be seen as a resounding victory for the rest of the world, by the way. Like for the global South, for all the nations in the periphery, they will look to this and they will remember it. Okay, this will be seen, and it already has, regardless of where this goes from this point on, it already has shown the world that America is spread too thin. It's not capable of defending their security partnerships. Their security partnerships very quickly turn into, their collaborative security agreements very quickly turn into missile sponges, right? And I think that will have reverberations that will be felt across the world for decades to come. They can protect the one nation that matters, though? No, they can't. That's the problem. They can't even protect the nation state of Israel. This is completely devastating America's confidence. It's over. Arnaud Bertrand says, I don't think people realize how extraordinary what we're witnessing with Iran is. I was arguing with a dear journalist friend of mine yesterday who was telling me that Iran was winning, yes, but only on the strategic level, not tactically. Okay? Think about other U.S. wars of aggression these past few decades. Take Vietnam, Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, Serbia. The list is unfortunately very long. The pattern was roughly always the same, with an immense power differential between the aggressor and the victim. These wars were, by and large, imperial, the empire attempting to crush a much weaker people whose only realistic resource was guerrilla resistance. And that is when they actually had the will to resist. Some, like Libya, barely even bothered, just resigning themselves to their fate despite being at the time the richest country in Africa. Sure, the U.S. actually lost many, if not most, of these wars, famously replacing the Taliban with the Taliban or being expelled with their tail between their legs from Vietnam, but the power differential was no less real for it. It's just that power doesn't always guarantee victory. So these endeavors were failures as far as like America, enforcing whatever will they had upon these people, but they weren't necessarily failures from a capitalist perspective. From a capitalist framework, these were wars that were meant to go on, right? And in the process, people made money because they were somewhat contained, okay? They were contained. This is not contained. This is global as you can get. Although you can see it as a proxy potentially, and China has a limited involvement so far as we understand, as far as we know. It's America and Israel fighting against Iran, and Iran basically against the whole world, right? The impact of this, the impact of Iranian retaliation is felt across the world, especially in the Asian markets, right? So it's not necessarily good for American capital right now, especially because there's a balance, right? You lose some of your forces, you lose some of your tanks, maybe you lose some of your machines, and then those can be replaced. But you start losing radar installations, okay, hard fixed positions. You start completely running out of munitions, like defensive munitions, and you're in a very different ballpark. You can't go above a certain level of attrition and still maintain your dignity and still maintain your leverage, your upper hand. America has gone far past that point. Okay, the moment that they abandoned their military bases and openly and readily admitted, by the way, something that you could have found out if you were watching this broadcast for the past couple of weeks, something that we talked about from like day 2 or day 3, something that we saw here was that these bases were fucking getting cratered, right? They were getting lasered by Iranian ballistic munitions and also Shahed drones. And for the price of like relatively cheap gear, Iran was able to destroy billions of dollars of radar installations and make these bases uninhabitable, unusable for a future campaign where troops could be stationed and create a logistical supply chain between the front lines and these bases, right? Like they were able to successfully destroy this stuff. And at the time, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, you can't, this is nothing. I mean, we killed the Ayatollah. That's far more consequential. That's far more significant." And I kept repeatedly telling you, okay, the Ayatollah is dead, but I mean, Iran is destroying American military bases and causing billions of dollars of loss. This is a huge, huge deal. This is unlike anything America's ever faced before, right? Laser with a Shahed drone is an oxymoron. Okay, calm down. So, and you have seen mainstream media basically finally catch up to the realities on the ground. New York Times, I believe, reported on this as well. They said the bases are unusable. All the troops had to escape the bases. They had to retreat, and they're now working from home. They're working from civilian areas, right? That's an admission of defeat. And now Americans know it as well. Americans that don't come to the Piker Broadcasting Service know it as well. But that's why I always say, subscribe to the Piker Broadcasting Service for tomorrow's news today, right? That's why I say it. Iran is demanding the U.S. base be permanently closed, a condition for ending the war. Yeah, that's actually a gimme. 35% off subs? Wait, really? Nice. That's actually a gimme. That's like Iran saying we're going to collect tolls from people passing the Strait of Hormuz. Those two things have already happened, right? So that's actually not a real demand that they're making from America. That's basically like a freebie for America to make it seem like they're conceding on some things. Those things have already happened. Iran won those demands militarily, right? Iran accomplished those demands militarily when they actually present that as like something that they want. That's a freebie for Americans to say, yeah, sure, we'll concede on those points. It'll hurt to concede on those points, but at the end of the day, those points have already been conceded, right? The battle lines have already been drawn. It's like when Vladimir Putin says you need to recognize the legal annexation of Crimea, right? Like that has already taken shape, right? If you look at the situation or the eastern territories that we have hardened our positions in, like you have to give us legal recognition, right? Or at least de facto recognition of annexed territory. That's already happened. That was something that they militarily conquered. It's, in the case of Russia, by the way, I'm not giving you like a moral consideration here. That's just the facts on the ground, right? As it stands currently. So when they present that as a condition for a ceasefire, that's actually given That's actually there's a freebie for the American side to say yes to. So that's something to also consider. Anyway, but in the past, when you looked at these wars from afar, as we have done, it was like a big bully beating the shit out of like a helpless country, right? Destroying its population. These countries that had no standing military force to withstand the United States of America, and were engaging in insurgency battles. And America, experienced a lot of shortcomings in that process, but like because of the ways in which these wars were contained, America could still make money without like reaching a level of receiving too much damage in retaliation, right? This time is different. And it's different. It's different in a way that you can see, right? It's different in an undeniable way because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, or rather, it's only open for business for whoever Iran sees fit. That's an undeniable reality, right? Donald Trump can go on television and be like, Iran is giving us a great gift and allowing ships to cross through the Strait of Hormuz, but they set those conditions, right? They set those conditions, and some of those conditions are directly undermining the petrodollar, right? Trading with Chinese yuan. That's a huge deal. Giving Iran a toll, a fee, where the Iranian Navy is controlling all of the commerce that's going through the Strait of Hormuz in a similar structure to the Suez Canal with Egypt, right? So Donald Trump can say we're winning one of our goals here, but like it's very clear for everyone who's paying close attention to what's going on that no, Iran is actually putting belt to ass, right? Framing this as a gift to us is yet another recognition that Iran is setting the table. Iran is controlling all the cards. And it's something that is undeniable. There is no way that you can propagandize out of this. Like maybe for the cult. Maybe for the cult. They'll say, oh, Trump is doing the best. Trump is killing it, right? But for the foreign leaders that are paying attention, they don't give a fuck. They see the truth. It doesn't matter. That is going to have reverberations. Ultimately, that is what that's what I'm paying attention to. Okay, that's what I think is massively consequential. Okay, but the Suez is different. Egypt has a right cause. Egyptian workers dug the canal. Yeah, but it's still a strategic choke point at the end of the day, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, my point is, it's right there, and Iran controls it militarily. They control it. There's no fair is fair in this situation. If you have designed the world for might is right, you can't turn around and try to lean into international relations like this. You have set the standard now. And you should be, if you're an America enjoyer, if you're an American, you should be very grateful that Iran has actually abided by restrictions and standards of the previous ways of doing business. Right now, they're doing might is right. But even when they're doing might is right, they still don't operate like America or Israel does, in spite of the reality that America and Israel aren't doing that. They are directly hitting energy grids first. That's huge, okay? Civilian areas, killing thousands of civilians, engaging in chemical warfare, right? Hitting refineries. Iran has not done that first. Iran has only done that in retaliation to America and Israel's actions. And even then, when you look at the casualty percentages, civilian versus enemy combatants, the American and Israeli civilian to armed combatant casualty numbers are both far higher as far as like total numbers, and they're far worse as far as the percentages. Okay? There being no way to propagandize out of this is exactly why Trump ain't pulling out. He refused to publicly concede else. He has done so before. This time it's a little bit different, though. He has done that. He's done that with Ansar Allah in the past. So when things get too sticky, Trump has time and time again demonstrated that he is capable of, pulling out. The problem is this time it's a far more consequential L. It's not like you're just, you're just stopping your unnecessary bombing campaign of Sanaa, the poorest country on the planet, Yemen, right? Like you're now very openly in front of the entire planet. You're very openly going to be conceding to a country that we had the capabilities of starving economically for 40 years. What does that say to the rest of the world? That we could not militarily dominate a country that we could economically dominate. We have destroyed the Iranian economy. We have forced them into finding alternative methods, alternative means. And we've done this to so many other countries that those alternative means actually revealed themselves as a matter of necessity, right? I've talked about this before. When you sanction the whole world, at a certain point, you're sanctioning yourself. And because we've sanctioned so many countries, because we have engaged in this tool of economic warfare, collective punishment in the form of sanctions on some of the poorest countries, that it probably played a major role in creating a secondary market. That secondary market has allowed Iran to at least survive, right? And here we are. What is this? River to sea. Some people wanted China to do their version of the USSR's Afghanistan. Thank God they didn't spread thin and let Iran take on the U.S. by themselves here to move the troops. He's not pulling out. Our soldiers have been preparing to murder Iranians for decades. He's not pulling out now. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I personally think that when America moves troops, they use them, right? At least when Donald Trump moves naval assets, he uses them. Even if there's a talk of an off-ramp, even if there's a talk of de-escalation, when America moves troops into an area, they're going to try and use them. We'll see. I hope that's not the case. Like I've said over and over again, and I stress the importance for the safety and security of the Iranian people, the Iranian government must remain intact, at least for now, right? The next day after, who knows? But for now, the IRGC must remain intact. The Iranian government must remain intact, because the alternative, if Israel gets his wishes across, means Iran collapses and is no longer a state. Thousands of years of history and culture is gone, okay? We've seen how Israel operates. We've seen how Israel operates in Gaza, how it operates in the West Bank, how it's currently operating right now in Lebanon, how it operates in Syria. You do not want that fate for your people, regardless of how much you might hate, for justifiable reasons, for good reasons, regardless of how much you might hate the IRGC or how much you might hate the Ayatollah. At the end of the day, this is a matter of survival, right? That's it. It's that simple. So the best out of all of the worst case scenarios is that America takes an off-ramp, de-escalates, gives Iran sovereignty, the country remains intact, and there's economic pressures that are released, right? The sanctions are released, and Iran can participate in the global economy as a normal sovereign state with dignity. And slowly but surely, the material conditions of everyday Iranians improve, and hopefully there are social pressures that are alleviated as well in the process, right? That's why I say the best case scenario for the Iranians is that America takes an L on this and gracefully exits, which we're not known to do. And this is actually good for Americans as well, because if you understand that our endless military conquest around the world is not beneficial for the people that we're dominating, and is not even beneficial for us here in the imperial core, any sort of pushback that causes American restraint is good for the American people. It's good for the American people, because you're not the state. You're not Mr. Lockheed, and you're not Mr. Martin, okay? You're not John Raytheon. It might be bad for them if we stop funding these behemoths that demand more and more taxpayer-backed subsidies with their inflated budgets. But if you're a regular guy, if you're an ordinary American, all of your productive output is going to that. It's not going back to you, right? It's not going back to you. You might feel like it's going back to you somehow because your 401k is invested in like Raytheon or something, but that's marginal. If we were to restructure our economy to focus on ourselves, because we've taken this big L and we've decided, okay, we have to retreat from the rest of the world a little bit and focus on ourselves and build our infrastructure, focus on ourselves and build our education systems, focus on ourselves and build our healthcare systems. Something that people like yourselves in this community and myself, people like Bernie Sanders have been advocating for decades at this point. If we were to be able to achieve that by force because of the bloody nose that we receive in this endeavor, that's a much more prosperous future for the United States of America. Okay? That's it. So this is not a bad thing at all. It's the best case scenario. Turkish people have a saying, zararın neresinden dönersen kârdır. Okay? It translates to, no matter which point you turn away from harm or loss is a profit. Okay? That's it. And there has been a lot of loss so far. The IMEU policy project says just 1 month of the Trump-Israel war in Iran has cost U.S. taxpayers over $31 billion. Now, that is the most conservative estimate, okay? That is the most conservative estimate. It's far larger than that. That money could have been spent on you. That money could have been spent on all of the deterioration that you have experienced in your day-to-day activities. You walk around, there's homeless people everywhere. Buildings look dilapidated. Okay? There is a downward trajectory for the United States of America. Our infrastructure is crumbling. We have no more rural hospitals in this country. These things require money to fix. We have the money. We're the wealthiest nation on the planet, right? And yet, we don't spend it on ourselves. Because instead of spending it on these things that would improve the day-to-day experience of ordinary Americans, all that money goes to the CEOs and the major shareholders in the military-industrial complex. This must change. This is an infuriating indecency. It's unjust. And if America was able to dominate Iran militarily, it would never stop, right? It just wouldn't stop. And things would get worse and worse year over year, and we would wonder to ourselves why we live in the wealthiest nation on the planet, but it actually resembles a third world country with a Gucci belt. So that's why I have some optimism that we might learn an important lesson here. We might be forced to demonstrate restraint in the future. We might have to think twice. Or in the best case scenario, we might have to retreat. And that's a good thing.